Welcome back. I'm Alina Gonzalez Dockery, and today we're breaking down a question that is dividing the nation on some manner. What is it legal? When is it legal, or appropriate for a president to send troops into American cities? What's happening in Los Angeles right now isn't just about immigration, as we discussed in the previous segment. It's about power, protests, and the law. Let's make one thing crystal clear up front. Peaceful protest is protected by the First Amendment. It is one of the greatest gifts our founding fathers provided to us. Rioting, looting, and assaulting police are not. You can march, you can chant, you can rally, you can sit, you can stand, you can wave all types of flags, you can even burn the American flag. That is your God-given, constitutionally backed right. But once a brick flies through a window or a Molotov cocktail gets thrown, that's a crime, not speech. When you start breaking or trying to overthrow or overcome police force and try to impede the police from doing their job, like busting a sex crime, sex trafficking, or drugs bust, that is a crime. That is not protected speech. We're seeing both right now in LA and across several cities. People demanding justice and others taking advantage of chaos. Some of these very same groups that thrived on the chaos from 2020 are also trying to impart all of the chaos here. Federal officials have charged protesters with violent acts, Molotov cocktails, assault on officers, property damage. These are serious crimes and should be treated as such. It should not be ignored. But here's the other half of the equation. President Trump sent National Guard troops and Marines into California without Governor Newsom's consent. And that's where history matters. That is what Governor Newsom brought a litigation to prevent Trump from being able to employ the Marines to bring order out of the chaos that is erupting in LA. So where in history has president invoked military and National Guard, which is a military unit, to bring peace and order? Well, let's look at President Eisenhower. 1957, President Eisenhower used the troops to enforce desegregation in Little Rock, Arkansas. In the 1960s, President John F. Kennedy and President Lyndon Johnson did the same to protect civil rights. In 1968, President Johnson sent National Guard troops after MLK's assassination to quell rioting that was breaking out in cities, especially across the South. In 1992, President George H.W. sent in National Guard and troops due to the Rodney King riots after the not guilty verdict of the police officers that brutally beat Rodney King. But where's the difference there? Let's look at the 1992. What is the difference? Because this is really the last time that LA had a president send in troops to help keep calm or bring peace back to this city. That was because George H.W. Bush waited for California's request. It was upon the request and consent of the then governor of California. And in 1962, over 60 people died due to those riots breaking out, and the city was literally burning, and it was a last resort. Those presidents understood the weight of that decision. Now, I will tell you, for one, I believe that even if Governor Newsom is against this, I think that sometimes common sense dictates National Guard needs to be put out there to ensure that there is peace and order and not destruction. And if a governor is not willing to lead by example and say, you know what, this is getting out of control. If a mayor who has allowed blindly until such time as World Cup and FIFA are looking at it going, we may need to do another plan B for this because this is getting out of control, then you need to worry about how you're being portrayed. And Governor Newsom, even though he has started his podcast and he wants to kind of in his podcast look like somebody that's in more center or trying to be more moderate, he needs to stand up and say, you know what? This is getting out of control. I am the governor. I am the first order. I am the one who's in charge, and the buck stops with me, and I'm going to initiate the National Guard because guess what? Gavin Newsom does have that authority. So when does enough become enough? When you're looking at violence, you're looking at looting, you're looking at businesses being looted, which have nothing to do with immigration protests, then does the president have the right and authority to initiate troops, whether it's the National Guard, Marines, or whatever, to be able to bring peace? Now, the Marines that have been set, they're outside of LA, they're sitting there, they're not arresting anybody, they're basically there as peacekeepers. So Governor Newsom is stating that the troops are uninvited and is raising both legal and moral alarms based on the fact that, oh, King Trump, you know, because of this whole, oh, he's an authoritarian and stuff. But when should we, the people, look around and go, you know what? Especially if you live in California, in LA, going, who's protecting the federal property? Who is protecting us? Why can't we have peacekeeping? Why is it that we always have to fall more towards the side of people who want to vandalize and cause chaos and ruin and destruction and violence? See, Trump is saying, you know what? I'm going to send out the Marines to protect federal property. So here's where the constitutional gray zone is. And when presidents stretch these powers, they risk turning troops into political weapons, which it's not going to be the first time and it's not the last. Remember, during the COVID BLM protests, which, you know, for some states, that was the only time you were allowed to have a lot of gatherings. Trump was telling governors of states that were like Minnesota that were allowing rampant riots and destruction and fire and all that, I'm going to send in the troops. But he didn't because there was such a pushback. But you know what's funny is that was the blowback on the Democrats. May not have seen it in, which I still say 2020 is an anomaly year because of the way the elections were dealt with. But down the line, one of the things is the people are like, who is more apt to protect us? We, the people. Because remember, these people who are protesting or causing chaos, they are a very small minority, an extremely small percentage. Who's protecting us? Who is protecting our neighborhoods? Whose duty should it be? And when does the president of the United States get to say, enough is enough, I'm stepping in, I am protecting my people? Because even though we may be in individual states, we are one country. The Insurrection Act may allow troop use, but only in extreme breakdowns. And that standard may not be met in California, just as it is. Again, the First Amendment protects peaceful assembly. It does not protect violence, arson, or assault. Democratic leaders are now urging calm. Don't give Trump what he wants. They remember 2020. Or do they? Because Newsom is definitely not playing by that handbook. Because if I were Governor Newsom and I was looking at a play on 2028 presidential election, I'd be like, you know what? I can protect the people. I'm tough on crime. So right now, everything looks as what's happening in LA, and it's going to be, look at New York City. You know what? Those police are breaking down that. They're making arrests. They are stepping in. The LA were not doing that up until recently, up until now, when the mayor's like, okay, time out. This is going to financially hurt us. Force is easy to send in, but nearly impossible to control. So what's the lesson that we have? Protesters, protect your cause by staying peaceful. Law enforcement, enforce the law, not fear. And President Trump, use your power wisely, or history will use it against you. And yes, you do not have to run again. Absolutely, I get it. However, you do have Republicans that are up for midterm elections. How is this going to play out? And honestly, this is playing out better for the Republicans than it is for the Democrats if you allow chaos to reign. That is the truth. And that is the thing. So the Maxine Waters, the people that are bringing out the 1960s type of chants, that's not going to help you. If we're not careful, we'll wake up in a country where the sound of boots in the street is more common than the sound of our voices. And that is something that we cannot allow. I am Alina Gonzalez Dockery. Thank you again for coming and watching another episode of We the People. If you love what you're watching, catch this episode of We the People and every Now Media TV show live on demand anytime. Just download the free Now Media TV app on your Roku device and get instant access to our bilingual content in English and Spanish. From business and news to lifestyle and culture, it's all streaming 24/7 whenever you're ready. Search Now Media TV on your Roku device and never miss a moment. Again, the right to protest must be protected. Our constitutional rights are a blessing and a gift. The rule of law must be enforced, and presidential power must be held to the fire of the Constitution. I am Alina Gonzalez Dockery. I'll see you next week, same time, same day.